The morning smells of sulfur and sea salt. On a whitewashed street, a girl steps over a fresh crack in the paving stones, the third this week. Beyond the rooftops, the harbor is crowded with painted ships that will never sail. It is a spring morning, more than 3,600 years ago, on an island the Greeks have not yet named, and far below it, the mountain has begun to breathe. What did it feel like to live in the final years of a world that believed it was eternal? The people of this island built running water into their homes and painted their walls with leaping dolphins. They were the most advanced culture in Europe. Then, in a single season, the sky came down, and their memory survived only as a rumor, passed down 1,000 years until a philosopher wrote it into a story he called Atlantis. We call them the Minoans, though that was never their name for themselves. We have never been able to read it. In 1900, a British archaeologist named Arthur Evans dug into a hill on the island of Crete and uncovered a palace so vast and so intricate that he named its people after the legend of King Minos and his labyrinth. The palace at Knossos held more than 1,000 rooms. It had light wells, clay pipes, and drains carrying water away beneath the floors, some of the earliest indoor plumbing anywhere on Earth. On its walls, young men and women vaulted over the horns of charging bulls. Their script, which we call Linear A, has never been deciphered, and their cities had no walls. Think about that. In an age of warlords and fortresses, the Minoans left their harbors open to the sea, because the sea was theirs. Their ships ruled the eastern Mediterranean. They believed nothing could ever reach them. 110 kilometers north of Crete lay a smaller island, a near-perfect ring of land wrapped around a deep blue lagoon. Today, we call it Santorini. Then, it was the jewel of the Minoan world. On its southern shore stood a town we now call Akrotiri. Picture one of its citizens, a woman we will never name, though the paintings she passed every day still survive. She lived in a house 3 stories tall, with a toilet on the upper floor connected to a drain. Her walls were painted with swallows courting above red lilies, with blue monkeys, with a fleet of ships gliding between 2 harbors. The pigments were ground from stone and mineral, the deepest blues carried across the sea. In the warm months, the hillsides smelled of saffron, gathered by women and girls into shallow baskets. A scene painted so precisely that botanists can name the exact flower. This was no rough Bronze Age village. This was a place of beauty, comfort, and quiet confidence. But the island was restless. In the years before the end, the earth shook again and again. Walls cracked. The people of Akrotiri repaired them, and then repaired them again. And then they made a decision that changed everything about how we understand them. When archaeologists finally uncovered the town, beginning in 1967 under the Greek excavator Spiridon Marinatos, they found the frescoes, the pottery, the beds, the storerooms still full of jars. They found almost nothing made of gold, a single small figurine of an ibex, hidden inside a wooden box, was the rarest exception. And they found no bodies, not one. The people of Akrotiri had read the warnings, gathered their most precious things, walked down to their ships, and left. Archaeologists call Akrotiri the Pompeii of the Aegean, but it is a Pompeii with no dead, a city that emptied itself before the end. Call it the city that walked away. So when the end came, it came to an empty stage. First, a rain of white pumice, light as dry bread, drifting down and filling the streets, the doorways, the drying racks, ankle deep, then waist deep, then higher than a standing man. For a time, the buried town simply waited beneath it. Then, the eruption changed its nature. Superheated surges of ash and gas swept down the slopes at the speed of a storm, and the pumice thickened into a gray tomb tens of meters deep. And in that silence, the paintings kept their colors. The swallows kept courting. The blue monkeys kept climbing walls that no longer had a roof above them. A single wooden bed, its frame long since rotted away, left its exact shape as a hollow in the ash. A mold that archaeologists would one day fill with plaster 3,500 years later and lift out again into the light. We do not know the exact year they left. The traditional dating placed the eruption around 1500 BC. But radiocarbon evidence, including an olive branch found buried alive in the ash, studied by the Danish scientist Walter Friedrich, points closer to 1600 BC. That debate is still unsettled. What is not in doubt is the scale. When Thera finally erupted, it became one of the largest eruptions in the entire history of human civilization. A column of ash and rock climbed more than 30 kilometers into the sky, high enough to pierce the stratosphere. Then the walls of the volcano collapsed inward, and the sea poured into the emptied chamber. Tens of cubic kilometers of rock were torn out of the earth. Ash fell across the eastern Mediterranean, settling in layers that geologists still read today like pages in a book. And across that 110 kilometers of open water toward the unwalled harbors of Crete, the sea began to move. On the northern coast of Crete, it had been an ordinary day. There was no earthquake here, no warning tremor, only, far off on the southern horizon, a strange gray column standing against a clear sky, and hours later, a low sound like distant thunder that did not stop. Then the water pulled back from the shore, further than anyone had ever seen it go. The waves that followed struck within the hour, tall enough to shatter the beached Minoan ships and drown the harbor towns. Anyone still on that beach? A fisherman mending nets, a child in the shallows, a crew loading cargo would have had less time to escape than it takes to cross a courtyard. At Palikastro, on the eastern tip of Crete, archaeologists have found the wreckage of that flood, building stones, animal bones, and broken pottery, dragged inland and dumped in one chaotic layer. The fleet that had made the Minoans untouchable was, in a single afternoon, gone. But here's the strange part, the part that took historians most of a century to accept. The Minoans did not die that day. The eruption did not end their world. It wounded it. For perhaps 100 years afterward, the palaces of Crete still stood. But something had broken. The ash may have poisoned the harvests. The lost fleet could not be replaced. The trade routes that fed the islands fell quiet. And around 1450 BC, generations later, the great palaces of Crete burned, one after another. When the smoke cleared, a new script appears on the clay tablets. Linear B, deciphered in 1952 by a young Englishman named Michael Ventris. It was not the Minoan language at all. It was Greek. The Mycenaeans, from the mainland, now ruled the island. The Minoans did not vanish in a day and a night. They faded across 4 generations. Slowly enough that no single person living through it would ever have known they were watching the end of the world. And this is where the story, quietly, becomes ours. More than 1,000 years later, around 360 BC, the philosopher Plato described a great island power, advanced, prosperous, ringed by water, that sank beneath the sea in a single day and a single night. He called it Atlantis. We may never prove that he meant the Minoans. The idea was first argued by the archaeologist K.T. Frost in 1909, and it has never been settled. But notice what Plato's story does. It takes a slow, tangled death and folds it into one catastrophic night. We still do the same thing. We imagine our own endings as sudden. A single day, the world changes. Because the truth is harder to hold. That most worlds end quietly, in stages, while people are still out repairing the cracks in the paving stones. The people of Akrotiri walked down to their ships and sailed away, carrying almost nothing. We do not know where they went. Somewhere out on the water, they became refugees, then strangers, then no one at all. Their language unread, their names unwritten, their painted swallows sealed under ash for 3,600 years. They were not swallowed by the sea in a single night. That was only the story we told afterward, because it was easier than the truth. They didn't drown. They were simply forgotten, which, in the end, is the slower way a world disappears.